I've got a piece of Arches oil paper taped up ready to use here, and I'm going to be using some of my favourite Cobra water-based oils. So I've got the burnt umber here, I've got the Persian rose, which is my absolute go-to pink, and obviously my Prussian blue. I've also got the Winsor & Newton permanent sap green, the artisan water mixable oil. And I've got the paints squeezed out here on a paper tear-off palette. I've been working on this already this morning. So these are sort of on the go, but still fairly clean. And I've squirted a bit of water in the corner here, which has already got blue. So I'm going to start, I always, for my sky, I always pick up some colour. Actually, while it's quite warm in here, I'm just going to a little bit of a squirt. And I tend to mix all my paints very much sort of on the paper. So I'm just going to put some paint down. I'm just dampening my fingers because it does soak in quite quickly on the paper. And then I'm just working the paint in. I love working with my fingers, and the beauty of the water mixable oil paints, of course, is that they're very kind to your skin, unlike a traditional oil, which is one of the reasons I like using them. And then everything just cleans up with soap and water afterwards. So that's not a very interesting sky at the moment, but we can work back into that. And then I'm just going to put in a line of sea. I tend to use these little IKEA brushes, which are just the right size. Again, it depends, you know, whether I'm working on a large scale or a small scale. So it's choosing your tools really to fit what you're working on. I'm not worried too much about whether that's level or straight or what that is, because being oil paints, I've got plenty of time to play with things later. So I think that's probably enough. What I really want to be concentrating on is this beach, the beach at low tide, which, as those of you who follow me will know, that's what always sort of floats my boat. So that had rather a lot of blue in my white paint. So I'm just putting a bit of colour down really, getting it onto the paper. So I really think about just getting some paint on the paper, mixing it as I go. And I can work into this, but I always feel happy when I've actually got some paint down to. So the Prussian blue with the brown makes a lovely turquoisey colour. So let's just blend that in at the water's edge there. I'm very much at the moment as well into this pink, so I am just going to bring some of this pink softly into the sand. So you can't particularly see it, it's just giving a little bit of a sort of softer edge in places. And again, I will probably build that up more later. I'd like to get some pink going in my sky. So really working it in with my fingers here. And then I'm going to just come down to the foreground quickly now and pick up some of this sap green and put some of that down. Quite a lot of it there, possibly too much. And then I'm just going to think about sort of scraping into that, possibly adding in some pinky bits. Sensation of sort of spring flowers, actually quite liking that, the two mixing together though. It's got a bit fussy, isn't it? So let's just soften that down there. And I need some more white. Getting to the end of this tube of white. It's a bit like toothpaste. I don't treat my tubes very well, so I end up with them not wanting to squeeze out the last remnants, because I know that there's still plenty in this tube. There we becomes, I get through a lot of titanium white. Never really got on with the mixing whites. I like the solidity of the titanium. So let's just put some of that white down here. So, as I say, really just sort of, not sure about that green. I think I might even just think about losing some of that. Again, the thing with working on paper is that I can at any time choose to chop that bit off if I decide that I don't like it. But actually where I've got bits of green in the white, it's quite luminous, that. So I'm actually, happy accidents and all that. I think I might keep this green in the bottom, but very much soften it. So that it's really more of a sort of sensation, a hint of the pink than anything too firm. What I do then want is actually to be bringing in a little bit more of this blue coming down the page. The sensation of that water left behind on the tide going out. There's always little pools of water, and that's what catch the light and reflect. The Prussian blue with the white is a lovely colour. So I'm just, I'm really not worrying too much about any of this at the moment. And I will work back into this probably when it's dry. So I'm not at this stage thinking, that this needs to look like a finished painting. I'm not worrying about it. I've just got the paint on the palette that I needed to finish off. And thinking, let's get a piece of paper out and have a go at something. Of course, the oil paint keeps, for several days, as long as it's protected from too much air. It'll keep probably for a week or more once it's out on the palette. So that is one of its sort of joys over working with acrylics. But I like that it's so movable for so long. Although that as well has its negatives, because as I say, you can very easily end up making mud because things are not dry enough when you're a bit impatient and wanting to go back in and overwork things. I'm just going to put a bit of this pink in the sky. It might go purple because my blue is still very wet. But let's see what happens there. I think it's probably too wet. So I sort of move between the palette knife and the squidgy and the brush. So yeah, that was too wet. So that's, you can see that's just lost it really. I've not, let's just blend that in. I've not really added anything there, which is a little disappointing because I would have liked a bit more detail in my sky. She says carrying on regardless. So I think my sky is going to have to wait till things are a bit drier to build up any more interest there, because it's become really quite thick. This will be several days until this is dry enough now to do anything more on. Do I want some headlands in there? I don't. So I'm just mixing up the blue and the brown, which gives a very good dark. So mix that up, and then I'm going to use my, they're good for straight lines. Again, I think my sky might just be too wet to be wanting to take that paint. Yeah, patience really. It's just losing itself in the blue. Just a sensation of it there. That might lose that severity there, I think. And what might be nice is just under the headland actually to come in with, Even maybe a little bit of white there. Just to give it a little bit of definition. It's got a bit heavy in the background. Bits down here that are starting to do things. But it's probably got enough paint on it for the moment. But I'm a bit, I don't know, I get a bit carried away. I find it difficult to stop, even though I'm at a stage where probably stopping would be a good thing to do, because it is quite wet. Although that's quite nice, that wave coming in. Okay. Should we have a little bit more of that, or would it be too much if I had more? As I say, the beauty is that, you know, it's a piece of paper. It's not a great big expensive stretched canvas, which is always a little bit more terrifying because it's cost you so much, and you worry then far more about making a mess of it. And I think part of it for me is just, you know, I just enjoy painting. I'm quite enjoying sort of just seeing what happens. But, you know, sometimes I lose it and I wish I'd stopped. And so actually suddenly this bit of beach is becoming very much where the tide's coming in. So that's, I like this angle coming in. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to trying to do a few sort of bits in the bottom here. It's drying a little bit now. Might get away with. Do I want pinks in there? I think if I'm going to put some pinks in there, I'm going to need to put some in the sky when it's a bit drier. Feeling like this needs a bit more life in it without being anything too heavy. It's just this sensation of the wet sand and reflections. It's actually quite liking some of what's happening here, so and I think I'm going to stop and let that dry.